My aunt's voice had a particular quality when she was lying. It went soft, almost kind. She loved you, of course, she said, not looking at me. She just wanted to make sure things were handled practically. I sat across from her in the attorney's conference room and said nothing. The leather chair was cold. Outside, it was one of those flat gray January mornings that makes everything look like it was shot in low resolution. My grandmother had been dead for 11 days, and her attorney, a thin man named Mr. Carver, who seemed allergic to eye contact, was shuffling papers at the head of the table like he was trying to find a specific card in a deck he'd already dropped. My cousin was there too, sitting next to his mother with his arms crossed and a small, private smile on his face. The kind of smile someone wears when they already know how a movie ends. I didn't know yet. I should back up. My grandmother raised me from the time I was 9 years old. My parents died in a car accident on I-90 inches October, a Tuesday, during a rainstorm that the weatherman had called mild. I remember being pulled out of class and taken to the principal's office, and I remember thinking, as I walked down that hallway, that I must have done something wrong. I had not done anything wrong. The world had just decided, without consulting me, to rearrange itself. My grandmother picked me up that same afternoon. She didn't cry in front of me. She brought me to her house in Brentwood, Tennessee, sat me at her kitchen table, made me a grilled cheese sandwich, and said, "You're going to be okay, Claire. Not today, maybe not for a long time, but you will be." I believed her because she said it like it was a fact she had already verified. She was a practical woman. She'd worked as a bookkeeper for 30 years. She kept her finances in a leather-bound ledger even after every bank in the country had moved to online portals. She owned her house outright. She had a brokerage account, a savings account, and a small collection of municipal bonds that she called her quiet money. She was not wealthy in the way that word usually gets used. But she was careful. And careful. Over 60 years? Compounds. She was also the only person in my family who treated me like I belonged. My aunt, my father's sister, was a different story. She had always been the kind of person who kept score. When I was 12, she told me at Thanksgiving that I was lucky my grandmother had taken me in, which was the first time I understood that in some people's minds, love is a ledger too. She had a son, my cousin, who was 2 years older than me and had spent the better part of his adult life starting businesses that his mother funded and the market quietly ignored. I went to college on academic scholarship. I graduated with a degree in accounting, passed my CPA exam on the first attempt, and got a job at a firm in Nashville. I visited my grandmother every Sunday. I balanced her checkbook when her eyesight started to go. I drove her to her cardiologist appointments and sat in the waiting room reading whatever magazine was 6 months out of date. I was not doing these things to be repaid. I want to be clear about that. But my grandmother, in her practical way, had told me what she intended. She'd shown me her will 3 years before she died, sitting at that same kitchen table, with her ledger open and her reading glasses on. The house was to go to me. The brokerage account, split equally between me and my aunt's family. The savings, a portion to her church, the rest to a scholarship fund she'd set up in my parents' names. "This is what's fair," she said. "I need you to know it, in case anyone tries to tell you otherwise." I had not understood, then, why she felt the need to say that last part. I understood now. Mr. Carver cleared his throat and began to read. The will he read bore my grandmother's name and her signature. It directed the house to my cousin. The brokerage account, in full, to my aunt. The savings account, split between the church and the scholarship fund, which was the one detail they'd apparently kept, maybe to make it look clean. And to me, her jewelry, her books, and any personal effects deemed sentimental in nature. I sat very still. My cousin uncrossed and recrossed his arms. My aunt smoothed her skirt. "I know this may come as a surprise," she said, and her voice had gone soft again. "But she changed her mind, Claire. She wanted to make sure the house stayed in the family bloodline. You understand? I am not a bloodline. I am an orphan she chose." That was the argument, distilled to its ugliest form. "When was this version executed?" I asked. Mr. Carver looked up. "Excuse me? When was this will executed? The date of signing?" He glanced at my aunt for just a half second, not long, but I saw it before looking back at his papers. November 14th. My grandmother had died on November 9th. I don't know what my face did in that moment. I hope it did nothing. I felt something drop through me, like a stone through still water, and then I felt something else come up behind it. Not rage, clarity. Cold, clean, and very precise. "I'd like a copy of that document," I said. My aunt frowned. "I'm not sure that's necessary right now. You're emotional." I'm a CPA, I said. I'd like a copy of the document. Mr. Carver slid one across the table. I took it, folded it, put it in my bag, and said I needed some air. I drove to a coffee shop 2 blocks away, ordered nothing, and sat at a corner table with my laptop open and my phone on the table and my hands completely steady because I had learned a long time ago that you do not let people see your hands shake. The will was a PDF. That much Mr. Carver had given me. I opened it. Here is something most people don't think about. Digital documents carry information that the document itself doesn't show you. It lives in the file's properties, dates, software. And if the document was signed electronically, which this one had been, using a common e-signature platform, the platform generates its own certification record, a timestamp. Log to the second. The signature on this will was timestamped November 14th. My grandmother died November 9th. A dead woman had signed a legal document 5 days after her death. I sat with that for a moment. Not because I needed time to process it, but because I wanted to make sure I was right and that I was not looking at this the way people sometimes look at things when they want them to be true. I checked the document properties. I cross-referenced the e-signature platform's own certification record, which was embedded in the PDF's metadata. I looked at it from 3 different angles. I was right. I called my own attorney that afternoon. Her name is Dana, and she is the kind of lawyer who sounds bored until she is not bored, and then she is very frightening. Tell me again about the timestamp, she said. I told her again. There was a pause. Okay, she said. Don't talk to your aunt. Don't talk to Mr. Carver. Don't post anything. Send me the file. I sent her the file. She called back 40 minutes later. Claire, I need you to understand something. This isn't a civil dispute about a will. If what you're showing me is accurate, this is a felony. Probably multiple felonies. Fraud. Forgery. Potentially elder abuse, depending on what happened in the weeks before your grandmother passed. I know, I said. You sound very calm. My grandmother taught me to balance books, I said. Numbers are either right or they're wrong. These are wrong. What we found over the next 6 weeks, as Dana subpoenaed records and the court appointed an independent forensic examiner, was not subtle. The e-signature platform used by Mr. Carver's office had a complete audit log. Every document, every signature request, every timestamp. The will my grandmother had actually signed, the one she'd shown me at the kitchen table 3 years earlier, had been uploaded to the platform in March of that year, when she was still sharp enough to manage her own affairs, still driving herself to church on Sunday mornings, still keeping her ledger in her careful accountant's handwriting. That document directed things as she had told me. The document Mr. Carver had read in his conference room was uploaded to the platform on November 12th, 3 days after her death. The signature certificate had been generated using an account tied to an email address that did not belong to my grandmother. It belonged to a subsidiary account under my aunt's name, tied to the same e-signature platform subscription my aunt used for her own business. She had signed my grandmother's name, from her own computer, 3 days after my grandmother died. Mr. Carver, it turned out, had not created the document, but he had accepted it, he had filed it. And when the forensic examiner questioned him under oath, he admitted that my aunt had contacted him the day after my grandmother's death and told him there had been an updated version of the will and that she would send it over. He had not verified provenance. He had not checked the account. He had filed what was sent to him. Whether that made him complicit or merely catastrophically negligent was, Dana told me, a question for the Bar Association. My uncle, my aunt's husband, had known. This is the part of the story that sits differently. He had been in the house when my aunt made the changes. He had not participated. He had also not stopped her. He had not called me. He had not called anyone. He had sat at his kitchen table and looked at the ceiling and decided that what happened in his house was not his business to correct. He was not charged with anything, but when this became public, and it became very public, his business partners distanced themselves, and 2 of the 3 accounts he managed professionally chose not to renew their contracts. Some things don't require a conviction to carry a cost. My cousin had not been involved in the forgery itself. He had believed, I think, that his mother was simply better at navigating things than I was, that she had found some lever he didn't know about and pulled it. When the investigation began and the shape of what she had done became clear to him, he did not defend her publicly. He also did not call me to apologize. He sent a text message that said he was sorry for how everything turned out, which is the thing people say when they want credit for an apology without taking responsibility for a harm. I did not respond. My aunt was charged with will forgery, electronic fraud, and 1 count of identity theft. Mr. Carver surrendered his license, pending a review board hearing, and faced a separate civil action. The independently verified original will, the one from March, the one my grandmother had actually signed, was admitted by the court as the controlling document. The house was mine, but I want to tell you about the morning I went back to it, because that is the part that stays with me. It was February by then. Cold. The kind of cold that is specific to Tennessee in winter, which is not dramatic like northern cold, but has its own gray patience to it. I had a key I'd held onto without knowing quite why. I let myself in through the side door, the one that opened into the kitchen, and stood there in the quiet. The ledger was on the counter. She kept it there because she said a book that isn't in reach doesn't get used. I picked it up and opened it to the last page she'd written. Her handwriting had gotten smaller toward the end, more compressed, but it was still precise. Every column balanced. I had not cried yet. Not when I got the news about the will. Not when I sat across from my aunt in that conference room and understood what she had done. Not during the 6 weeks of legal proceedings or the deposition where I sat at a conference table and presented document after document with the same flat affect I use when I find an error in a balance sheet. I cried then, standing in her kitchen, holding her ledger, with her coffee maker still on the counter and her reading glasses folded on top of a crossword puzzle she hadn't finished. I let myself have it for a few minutes. And then I stopped, because she had taught me to be practical. And being practical means you don't let grief become a place you live. I made a cup of coffee with her coffee maker. I sat at her table. I opened the ledger to a new page, and I started writing down everything that needed to happen next. There were contractors to call, a furnace to inspect, property taxes to understand, a brokerage account to transfer, a scholarship fund to contact, because she had wanted that to keep going, and it was going to keep going. Columns, numbers, one at a time. Outside, a car passed. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The coffee was stronger than I usually make it, because she always made it strong, and I had used her proportions without thinking. My grandmother used to say that the people who steal from you are almost always people who decided, somewhere along the way, that they deserved what you had more than you did. She said it not with anger, but with the weariness of someone who had seen the pattern repeat. The worst thing about that kind of person, she told me once, is that they're never wrong in their own mind. They've already done the math, and in their version, it comes out clean. I thought about my aunt signing my grandmother's name from her own home computer, 3 days after the funeral. Sitting somewhere in that house while her husband looked at the ceiling and her son watched television or made coffee or whatever he was doing, and just doing it, deciding it was fine. Deciding the math worked out. It didn't work out. I closed the ledger. The house smelled like her. Like coffee and old books and something faintly floral that I had never been able to identify, some lotion, maybe? Or a candle she used to burn. I didn't know if that would fade. I supposed it would eventually. I didn't think about my aunt. I didn't think about what would happen to her. The sentencing, the months ahead, the version of this story she would tell herself for the rest of her life to make it make sense. None of that was my column to balance. I thought about a Tuesday in October when I was 9 years old and the principal came to get me out of class, and about the kitchen table I'd sat at that same afternoon, and the grilled cheese sandwich, and the woman who'd looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "Without drama, without performance, you're going to be okay." She had been right. I picked up her reading glasses from the crossword puzzle and folded them and put them in my pocket. I finished my coffee. I picked up the phone and called the contractor. There was a lot of work to do,